Our scripture reading for the day comes from Exodus 6 through 8. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will give you to the land I swore with the uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Please greet those around you as you are seated.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Joshua, and I will be introducing our chapel speaker today, Beth. Beth is a speaker and an author and has written 18 books. Some of her books are available for you guys to grab on your way out. They will just be back there. There's about 300 of them, so feel free to stop by and pick up a copy on your way out. Beth is also a wife, mother, and grandmother, and together, she and her husband have raised 10 kids and are raising 6 grandkids. When she's not writing, traveling, or speaking, she spends her time playing games with her family, going on walks, and cooking. She is an incredible cook, and I can personally say that her chocolate chip banana bread is delicious. More than anything, she is wise, kind, loving, and nurturing. The way that she loves and serves her family and the Lord inspires me to do the same. So Taylor, please welcome to the stage my future mother-in-law, Beth Guckenberger.
Okay, Taylor, we got 4 passages, 3 stories, 1 Hebrew word. Let's go. Okay, so I went, right after college, I went on what I sometimes call a bad mission trip, nothing like your lighthouse trips. It was a trip where we were painting a wall at a church, blue to green, and the year before we painted it green to blue, and I knew that there could be something different that we could do in that city. So my husband and I hijacked the trip. We found our ways to an orphanage. We got exposed to what God was doing with vulnerable kids. We brought students along with us, and my life never was the same after. But when you finish a short-term trip, you come home and you're like, I'm going back to the same job, and I got the same house, and I'm driving the same car. What about me is going to look different? And so I kept saying to people, I feel like I got like a burr in my saddle. Like I'm sitting down in the same place, but it doesn't feel the same anymore. And in that season, we were double income, no kids. So we had more money than we needed. We lived off of one of our salaries, one of our teaching salaries. The other teaching salary we put in a bank account, and we were just saving it for a day when we thought God might ask us to do something about what we had seen on our short-term trip, but we didn't know what it would be. At the end of that school year, we were sitting on a treasure. It was 1 year of a teaching salary, so you know about how big my treasure was, but we decided we were gonna take that treasure and we were gonna just move to Mexico. We're just gonna move there, learn the language, develop relationships, try to build a bridge between people we knew in this country that had a heart for those who had need and those in that country who would benefit from a physical demonstration of God's love for them. And we wanted to build that bridge. So this is like honestly before the internet. So I bought a book on how to move to another country, and it said, well, when you take your money, you should take cash in small bills so that you can easily exchange it. So I lined up the week before we moved to Mexico. I lined up at my bank in Cincinnati, and I said, I'd like to withdraw my entire account in cash. And when you do that, the bank manager comes out, he's all like, so what are you gonna do with all your money? And I said, I'm moving to Mexico. And he's like, why don't you come in my office for a minute? So I went into his office. He talked me into doing something we don't even do anymore today, but I turned that whole account into traveler's checks. I put those traveler's checks in a backpack, and it takes 3 days to drive from where I was living in Cincinnati to where I was moving in Monterrey, Mexico. We got to Monterrey, and we did have some cash. We didn't turn all of it to traveler's checks. I think we had a couple $100s with us in cash. 8 days later, that cash ran out, and it was time to turn the traveler's checks into some pesos. So I lined up at a bank in Monterrey, and I had studied French for 9 years. Like, where was the Lord in the 7th grade when I had to choose between French and Spanish? I'm not sure, but I didn't know any Spanish. So I'd been there 8 days. I lined up in line, and they just told me in Ohio, you give these traveler's checks to anybody around the world, and they'll return to you local currency. So it was my turn in front of the window, and I just took them out of my backpack, and I was shoving them under the glass there was like a divot in the window, and you stuck it underneath there. And I smiled at the lady, and she starts to talk back to me through a microphone. I didn't understand what she was saying. I now know she was saying, Tienes que firmar tu nombre aquí, por favor, ponte el nombre aquí en la línea. But I mean, I couldn't even count to 10, so that was not helping me. She returned all those checks to me, and I thought, maybe she doesn't recognize them, and so I shoved them back to her, and that's not what she wanted. So she returned to me, and she did what people do when they think you don't understand them. They talk slow and loud. So she starts to go, firma tu nombre aquí en la línea, ponte el nombre aquí en la línea. And so I said to my husband, way too much confidence, I think she wants our passports. She liked to see our IDs. So I put my passport on those, and I gave them back to her, and that's not what she was saying. So she just starts to say one word over and over again, firma tu nombre, ponte el nombre aquí en la línea. And she's giving it back to me, and I finally heard one word that I had learned that week, I thought. And so I said to Todd, hey, give me pen and paper. And he did. And I wrote down the word I heard her say, nombre, on the piece of paper, and I showed it to her through the glass. And she's like, mm-hmm. And then she points to the line at the bottom of the checks, and I picked up my pen, and on every one of those checks, I wrote the word nombre. Nombre. Yeah, she clearly was inviting me to sign those checks, right? Okay, so Zechariah chapter 4, verse 10. Here's our first verse. It says this, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Like, Jesus was not looking down at my life that day and going, she's going to be a terrible missionary. Literally can't even cash a traveler's check. And pesos all over the world. But if I got up here and told you this chapter of the story, you might be tempted to give credit to the wrong person. But I stand in a long line of people throughout biblical history that were ill-equipped and underprepared for that which God had called them to. And the reason he asks people like us to enter into his story is because then he gets all the credit for the work that he then does through our submitted vessels. He's looking for two things as we talk today about surrender. He's looking for us to be faithful to him and available. I told you last night, if you were with us, how much I like Moses. I'm going to tell you a story in Exodus chapter 19. So Moses' life is 120 years, divided into 3 40-year periods. Exodus 19, he's 80 years old, so get your grandpa in your mind. That's what we're looking at, okay? 80 years old, Exodus 19, he's at the bottom of a mountain that we know is 6,000 feet tall. And God says to him, Moses, come up here to the top of the mountain. I got something I want to tell you. I mean, I'd be thinking to myself if I'm 80 years old, listen, if I can hear you tell me to come up, whatever you have to say to me, I can hear you just fine from down here. I don't want to walk up 6,000 feet, by the way. But Moses, he's not feisty like that. So he did what God asked him. He walks to the top of that mountain. I wonder what that cost him. I walked up a mountain exactly like it, half of Moses' age. I told my husband, I'm like, Jesus himself better be sitting at the top of this thing. This is really hard. He gets to the top of the mountain, and the Lord had a message he wanted him to deliver to his people. What a privilege. And God said, go down and give this message to my people. Then come back up and tell me how it went. If I was Moses, I'd be like, hey, you're like God, just watch. Like, I don't want to come back up here. By the way, this was 6,000 feet, and I'm 80 years old. But Moses doesn't make excuses when God gives him an assignment. He goes down and delivers the message to God's people, that he walks back up that mountain for the second time. When he gets up there, God says, I'm glad you're here because I have something I want to tell Aaron. Could you go down and get him and bring him back up with you? If I was Moses, I would have been like, since you're God and you always know everything that you want to do and are going to do, you could have told me you wanted Aaron 2 times ago. I would have brought him with me. But that's not how God talks to Moses. That's not how Moses talks to God. He does as he calls. He goes down that mountain, he collects Aaron, and I want you to imagine, remember we talked about the Bible's to be pictured. Imagine what it was like for Moses to walk up that mountain for the 3rd time. I think he would have literally needed the Lord for every single step. And I think this is this dependency that comes with surrender. That we get put in positions where we're not enough, by the way. We don't have it. We're not strong enough, smart enough, strategic enough, young enough, old enough, experienced enough, all the enoughs. Whatever excuse you are trying to offer to the Lord, it's true, you aren't. But that doesn't stop him from asking us to enter into those kinds of stories, to surrender to something bigger than us, because he wants to come and enter into that story with us. The Hebrew word I want to teach you today doesn't sound like it's that exciting. The word is Geshem, Geshem, Geshem. Geshem literally just means rain. But I want you to put yourself in the minds of those Israelite slaves before they crossed the Red Sea into freedom. And all those plagues are going on. Last night we had that good conversation about the plague of the frogs. All those plagues are going on. And through Moses, God is telling his people, I'm going to take you out of here. I am going to redeem you, just like Reed just read to us. I am going to take you to a place so amazing, we're going to call it the Promised Land. And in those days, those ancient days, countries that had access to water had access to power. This, just like maybe today we say countries that have access to oil have access to power. And so Egypt was very powerful because they had the Nile, this unbelievable water source. So imagine you're an Israelite slave, and you're hearing that we're going to get out of here and we're going to go to some place so amazing, it's called the Promised Land. Don't you think you'd be asking yourself, what kind of water do they have there? What kind of river runs through that kind of place? What kind of power do we find in a place called the Promised Land? Well, we now know as they cross that Red Sea, wander those years, eventually go through the Jordan, enter into the Promised Land, that the promise that Egypt has 30,000 times more water than they're going to find in the Promised Land. But here's what God tells the Israelites in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 11. But the land you're crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys. It's a land that drinks Geshem from the heavens. Because here's what happens in Egypt. That yes, they had access to that very powerful water source, the Nile, but if they wanted to irrigate their crops, they had to do it with the backbreaking work of bucket brigades. All of the work in order to access that water came at their own expense. And in a place called the Promised Land, the person who paid the prices is God. And he says, when your crops need water, you don't have to do any kind of bucket brigading. This is not going to be labor on your own back. When your crops need water, I'm going to literally make a Geshem from the sky. I'm going to make the water come down on you. I use Geshem all the time like an English word. Like when I find myself in an assignment that God has for me, it can be as simple as a conversation. I don't know what to say next. Or it can be something much bigger. When I find myself in a place where I recognize my own limitations, I tell the Lord, make it Geshem, like make it rain. I don't have it. I don't have what it takes. I will be faithful to you and I will be available to you, but you need to do all the rest. And those are the ways that he tells the very best stories. This is actually how it works. We adopted a boy when he was 12 years old into our family. And he was from Mexico, and I was bringing him to the United States. He had only been with us a few months, and nothing about this world made any sense to him. I mean, not the food, not the language, not the weather. The only time life felt normal to him in that first year is when he was on the pitch. Soccer was the one thing that translated into both cultures. So I put him on a 7th grade soccer team, and he loved it. We didn't give him a phone when he got here. He wasn't quite ready for that kind of technology. And so about 3 weeks into the school year, I got a text in the middle of the day from an unknown number. I knew it was one of his teammates. He just said, Tyler forgot his soccer shoes, and he was wondering if you could bring them up to school for him today. And so I was like, yeah. I left work and I went home and I found his soccer shoes by the back door and I drove up to school. By then it was after school and he had a game that night. So they had like an after school athletic study hall where you're supposed to be doing your homework before the game. And I walked into the study hall and I had his soccer bag with me. And I said, here, buddy, here's your cleats. And he looked at me and he goes, it worked. And I said, what do you mean it worked? He's like, I told him I couldn't play in the game today because I forgot my shoes. And one of them said to me, don't you have a mom? And he's like, yeah, I got one of those. And he's like, well, just ask her. She'll bring them to school. And he looked at me, he goes, I didn't know this is how this works. And I said, are you kidding me? We bring homework, lunch, like we bring everything. Like, yes, this is exactly how this works. He had been my child at that point for months. He had all the rights and privileges of being my kid, for me coming for him in those ways. He just still didn't understand that's how this works. You may be a child of God and you still might not understand this is how it works. You can ask for Geshem. You can ask him to come for you. You can get yourself in over your head and acknowledge that all that you have to offer him is your faithfulness and availability, and then you can watch him come and do the things that only God is capable of doing. And then remember, we started our time out this week with saying, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Then you get to go and tell that story. This is how it works. And I don't know what you think of. This week we've talked a lot about what it means to be face to face with God. Like I like that passage in Exodus 33. This is verse 11. Moses is going back up the mountain. He did a lot of mountain climbing, which, by the way, let me just say this about his 3 times. This is like a PS about his 3 times up the mountain. He's going to go up a mountain just a couple chapters after that experience in Exodus 19, and he's going to come down with something called the 10 Commandments, and that's a story we're still all talking about today. And I can be guilty of wanting a 10 Commandment size story without being willing to do the 3 times of training in order to get there. Like, recognize when God's asking you to do something yet again, that he's looking at your whole life at one time, and he knows exactly what that mountain climb is strengthening in you as you're experiencing him and being prepared for that which is still yet to come. In Exodus 33, it just says very simply that Moses goes up to the tent of the meeting, and the verse gets a lot of attention because it says there, God talks to him face to face as one would a friend. And we talked about 1 Kings 19 this week, right? That kol damama ka, that whole idea of God being in a position of proximity and intimacy with us, and there we get to hear his voice. But the reason I like 33:11 is not that part about how he talks to us face to face as one was a friend, but it says in that verse that Joshua, the son of Nun, his mentor, his mentee, follows him up there. Like, where are you going? I'm going to go. And it says that Moses gets the word from the Lord and he goes back down to deliver it to his people. But it says that Joshua doesn't leave. He gets a taste of what it looks like to be in the face-to-face presence of God. And he's like, forget it. You can go down there and do that. I'm not leaving the tent of the meeting. We had ourselves last night a little tent of the meeting. And if you turn your Bibles just a couple books after that experience, you'll see Joshua has some incredible adventures of his own. And I would argue to you, I don't think he would have been prepared or capable for them if he had not experienced time face to face with God as modeled for him by Moses. We've got to hear the voice of God. That's what puts But as you listen to his dad cheer for him, I want you to hear this is the sound, I think, that comes from heaven every day of your whole life. Okay, let's watch. That's what I think God sounds like. I think he's cheering you on that way. It says here in Hebrews chapter 12, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, I don't think, by the way, God is the only one cheering for you. I think you got a whole host of people up there who are cheering for you. We got a whole bunch of Taylor alumni who have gone before you and been a part of God's plan to heal and repair this world. And they're looking at you, the next generation, and that's what they sound like as their voice joins the chorus of heaven. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles. Let's get rid of those frogs. And let us run the race with perseverance that he has marked out for us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, for who the joy set before us. You know that word, joy. This is an integral part of the Taylor story, is joy. I shared this video this last summer in a very large gathering, and afterwards somebody came up to the front to talk to me. And I don't know exactly how old she was. She was definitely someone's grandma. She came up to talk to me. She was very serious. And she said, I was a state champion in my high school track team. And I was just like, and she was kind of shaking. She said, I have been furious for decades that my parents never saw me run. And I was just standing there. And then she started to cry. And she said, I heard the Lord whisper to me when I watched that race, I have never missed a race. He's never missed a race, not a day, not a mile. He's watching every single step you take. And you know what he sounds like? He sounds like that. He doesn't sound like, you should have trained harder. He doesn't sound like, I was here yesterday, I don't have to be here today. He doesn't sound like anything other than that. He's crazy about you, Taylor. He's crazy about what you're doing today, and he's crazy about what he has planned for you tomorrow. So let us run the race. Let's surrender fully to his mission. Let's sign up to be faithful and available, and he can add up all the days and write any kind of story he wants with our life.
Was that not awesome? Thank you so much for joining us for chapel. We're glad that you came today. And listen, we enjoy these kind of times together. You can learn more about Taylor at www.taylor.edu. God bless you.